Welcome. Thank you everyone for joining our second webinar in our API series. I'm your host, Nicole Phelps. I work in USGS's Water Mission Area as a science communicator. In today's webinar, we'll be talking about APIs, application programming interfaces. We'll give you some background on APIs in general and the OGC API initiative. Then we'll dive into OGC API features. We'll give you a live demo of this new USGS API for presenting monitoring location information, and we'll finish with about 20 to 25 minutes for live Q&A. We encourage you to submit questions throughout today's webinar as we will answer them in the second half. If we are unable to get to your question during this webinar, please send us an email at wdfn@usgs.gov with the subject API webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the WMA website and on the USGS YouTube channel. We'll be posting announcements in the chat throughout today's call, so look out for those. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Jen. Thanks. Yeah, the sensor things. So the Sensor Things API is now being populated with data in real time. It is ready for you to try out in your application. Did you miss the API webinar on Sensor Things that we held in January? Catch the recording and try out Sensor Things. We'll post some links in the chat. All right, let's go ahead and start with our first Slido, which is a live poll. If you've joined previous webinars, you'll be familiar with this. But if this is your first one, welcome. The way that you can join this live poll is by going to slido.com and entering the code API. Alternatively, you can click the link that will be in the chat shortly, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. Once people start responding, we'll be able to see the results live on screen. So we'll hang out here for just a few minutes while we answer this first question. Did you attend the first webinar? And if you have an answer unique that's not on the option list on the live poll, we encourage you to let us know in the chat. So again, to join this live poll, you can go to slido.com and use the code API. So if this is your first API webinar, which it looks like a lot of our attendees, about half, weren't able to attend the first webinar. No worries, we have some background on APIs in just a few minutes. It sounds a lot like what we gave in the previous webinar. And then we have some specificities about OGC as well. I'm going to give just a minute or two more to let people respond to this first poll, and then we'll have another question before we dive into the presentation for today. I'm honestly surprised that no one has selected the option yet for watching the recording, just because we generally have a lot of requests to get the recording, the link to the recording. And I know that we have a number of views on the YouTube version of the Sensor Things webinar from January. Yeah, that's good. We can move on to the next poll. So it looks like we had about 50-some people respond to this first question, and we have about 158 people tuning in right now. So yeah, Jim, you can go ahead and go to the next one. So the next Slido, the next live poll is asking, where did you hear about this particular webinar? Neat. We've already got a number of responses to that. I wonder if we like sent to live all the polls today, which is really cool. Normally we don't start to get responses to them until we go to the next one. But this is great, so people can just respond to all the questions at once. We'll have to figure out how to do that more for the future calls. It looks like the majority of people found out about this through the internal email. So I'm going to assume that we have a lot of internal folks on this call, which is great. Thanks for joining. It's so neat that people heard about it from the newsletter, which is new. We haven't yet released our second edition, and through a friend. That's really neat. I see that 8% of the, it looks like 60 some respondents to this particular poll said that they found it somewhere else. And if you feel so inclined, please let us know in the chat where you found this event, how you got here. So let's leave these live polls up. You can keep responding in the background, and we're going to go ahead and move on. I will now turn it over to Jim Kraft, Product Manager for Water Data Processing and Web Services. Jim will give you some key background on USGS Water Data, APIs in general, and then we'll talk specifically about OGC API features, and then he'll give you a demo of that. Take it away, Jim.
Now I'm unmuted. Thank you very much, Nicole. Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Kraft, Product Manager for APIs and data processing over here in the Water Mission Area Web Communications Branch. And first, before we dive into this specific API, we're going to just give a little bit of background as to why do we care about water data APIs. So let's start here. Each dot on the map is a stream gauge. If you take a look at the graph at the bottom of this page, we can see that the number of stream gauges has increased over time, resulting in over 8,000 gauges that are currently active in the USGS stream gauging network. We're so proud of the work that's gone into this network over time. Active gauges collect a wide variety of data, and we can do so many cool and powerful things with this data. But the way that we've historically shared and communicated this data hasn't always been effective and prevented the data from being used to its full capacity. So to better communicate the water data in a discoverable, accessible, and usable way, we've improved existing APIs and we're embracing new ones. Utilizing APIs allows us to answer questions like, how high will the water get? Is there enough water for people and farms? Are conditions good for fishing? How many turbines could I run? Which roads are flooded? And other critical questions based on water data. And we can answer these questions based on APIs. But what are APIs? Well, they're the magic behind the screen that programmers use, allowing us to communicate between systems. Everything you do and see on computers is driven by APIs at a variety of different levels. But if all APIs are important, what makes USGS APIs special? Well, at USGS, we collect a lot of really super cool data that deserves to be properly showcased. Our APIs allow for automated connections between our USGS source systems and your system. You can then build on that connection, interacting with data provided by USGS and adding data and tools that make sense for your specific context. In this example, this is actually our own monitoring location pages, where we take the API we'll be talking about today, OGC API features, to query for real-time monitoring locations that are close to the one that a user is currently at. We want our users to get the most out of our water data in an efficient, effective, and modern way. And we want to facilitate the use of USGS data in third-party systems so that users can take our data and use the data in the way that's most effective for you. So now we're going to do one more Slido here today.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Jim, for bringing that up. So this is our last live poll, and we're asking, just like we did in the previous webinar, if you've used any USGS APIs before. And it looks like some people have started responding to that one as well, so that's great. Let's hopefully get a few more responses in for that one, and then we'll let Jim continue his presentation. Oh, the majority, no, but I'm excited to try. Jim is smiling super hard right now. We can only share one video at a time with the limitations of Teams Live, but we're excited about that. We're excited that you're excited. Great, let's see if we can get like 60 respondents, which we're almost there, just a few more in. But the trend looks pretty established. Looks like the winner for this poll, the greatest number of responses are no, but I'm excited to try, which is super fun. Okay. All right, Jim, I'm going to turn it back to you and let you continue with your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
All right. Okay, so who are USGS APIs for? Well, the users that benefit from our APIs fall into two different user groups. Operationalized pull users that pull data from USGS systems at regular intervals or on the fly and use it to make decisions, often in the context of other data in secondary systems. And explore and download users who interact with our data in a number of ways and interact with it to create many different types of analyses, especially those who use tools like R and Python data retrieval. You can check our recent blog post on water data for the nation users. Click to the link to the blog is at the top of this slide and will be shared in the chat. Today, we're going to be talking about several APIs that fit under the umbrella of what is referred to as OGC API. The OGC API standards are being developed through the Open Geospatial Consortium to make it easy for anyone to put geospatial data on the web. These standards build upon the legacy of the OGC Web Service standards, things like Web Map Service, Web Feature Service, Web Coverage Service, and others, but define resource-centric APIs that take advantage of modern web development practices. They are being written in an agile, developer-centric way, based on lessons learned from both a long history of OGC and the geospatial web developer community during hackathons, interoperability experiments, and open source contributions. The first Drift standard to come out of OGC API, now known as OGC API features, was implemented in just a few weeks, which is light speed in standards world. Today, we're going to focus on a USGS implementation of OGC API features and talk about what other standards we're planning on implementing moving forward. You can learn more about the OGC API initiative at ogcapi.ogc.org. The link is on the screen and will be in the chat. So now let's dive into the USGS implementation of OGC API features. So stepping back a moment, unlike other USGS APIs, which were foundationally based on a proprietary tab delimited format called RDB, OGC API features is GeoJSON focused because GeoJSON is the common currency of geospatial data on the web. These existing USGS APIs were tied to an era in which every bit was precious and make heavy use of 1 to 3 character codes, such as ST for string. Therefore, in OGC API features and in other APIs that we'll be talking about and working on in the future, we focus on words over codes so that you don't have to look them up and you can just build your application. This way, the API outputs make intuitive sense from the beginning. So instead, as you can see here, instead of ST, we're putting out stream. The USGS OGC API features endpoint is documented with the Open API standard, which allows for generation of Swagger-style developer docs, a snippet of which you see on the slide. The OGC API foundational data model is about collections of items. So let's work through what that means for us today. Well, we can start with collections, groupings of monitoring locations that are related. From there, and so there are a number of collections that are available of monitoring locations. From there, we can look at one specific collection, RTS, the real-time stream gauging network, those monitoring locations that have real-time stream gauging data. From there, you can, if you add a /items, you get the features of the items that are inside that collection. In this case, all the stream gauges that are associated with the real-time stream gauging network. Then if you want to narrow your query, you can add parameterized queries from there, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Finally, you can get a single feature. In this case, you may recognize this identifier from the Sensor Things webinar. We're working toward using shared identifiers to make navigating different APIs easier. The most powerful part of OGC API features is that you can easily query features by their properties. Right now, you can query the USGS OGC API's features endpoint by country, county, state, hydrologic unit, national aquifer, monitoring location type, if the site is active or not, and bounding box. For example, this is a request for all the active monitoring locations that are groundwater wells in the state of Wisconsin. And interestingly, that's really it for describing the OGC API features endpoint. We'll look at the data structure a little bit more detail in the demo, where you'll see how easy it is to put USGS monitoring locations on the map. So what's coming? On OGC API features, we're expecting to have better collection management. And as the USGS modernizes its monitoring location data model, we'll be able to better manage that collection, those collections of locations, providing better context and more useful groupings. And we'll be able to be figuring out new and additional ways to get the latest data for a location, including potentially integrating data from Sensor Things into OGC API features to take advantage of the highly approachable query and data structure. But while OGC API features is a powerful and useful tool, there's additional work to do on this API to meet the latest version of the OGC API features specification. So we'll be doing more work in the OGC API space. We'll be working with the broader hydrologic community, including the OGC and the Internet of Water Organization, to build hydrologic profiles of these new standards to allow for more powerful cross-organizational data integration and sharing. In the future, we'll also be implementing the Environmental Data Retrieval API standard to enable querying and downloading different environmental data sets. Finally, I'll give you a quick teaser of OGC API processes. The OGC API processes standard supports the wrapping of computational tasks into executable processes that can be offered by a server through a web API and invoked by a client application. Typically, these processes execute well-defined algorithms that ingest vector or coverage data to produce new data sets. In our case, it allows you to integrate vector data with other high-value USGS data sets, such as the National Hydrologic Dataset and the USGS 3-depth digital elevation model, therefore making it possible to quickly do what previously required sophisticated GIS knowledge, such as generating river cross-sections or doing upstream boundary delineations. In a future API webinar, Dave Blodgett of the Water Mission Area Geospatial Intelligence Branch will focus on OGC API processes. Check the Water Data for the Nation blog if you want to attend that seminar. In the meantime, we've posted a number of resources about what there is available for OGC API processes right now in the blog post for this seminar. The link to the blog post will be in the chat. We want you to get involved with our API usability testing. Email WDFN usability testing at usgs.gov with the subject API usability testing. We want to know how easy it feels to get started using USGS APIs, if our documents make sense, and if our client libraries make it easier to use our systems. Check out the Water Data for the Nation blog for updates about future events. Okay, and now we're going to go into a quick demo of a few different implementations of OGC API features. Let's do a quick window rearrange here. Be with you in a moment. Okay. So the first place I wanted to note is the Observation Services Swagger docs. And so this actually has a few different pieces of this. It's on labs.waterdata. And fundamentally, we've got a couple different pieces, different experiments that are going on these services. But the one we're going to focus on today are the observations OGC API features. And so you can see again here, we've got our page is behaving poorly. Okay. We are going to get there we go. Joys of live demos. We're going to jump to another structure while we move on. Okay. Good thing I have several different pieces running at the same time. So one quick way that we can interact with this data is by putting this data on a map. And so it's simple enough here that this is a very small HTML document that's also available on the blog post. That should be in the chat already. But essentially, it's just a few lines of JavaScript to put this information on a map because the OGC API features is just speaking GeoJSON. So in this case, I've got a request for the real-time stream gauging network in Wisconsin for the monitoring location type of stream and that are active. And we want to put it on a leaflet map. And put a little pop-up that queries the feature properties to make a quick link on the pop-up, querying that monitoring location URL and the monitoring location name. And here we are. This is that same page, loaded from the browser, just loaded live. And we've got a link to the monitoring location URL for that page. Another example here is what we talked about earlier, where we've got the Sandy River near Mercer, Maine. And we're looking for stream gauges and other active monitoring locations that are nearby. And so these red dots are making live calls to the to OGC API features to get other nearby monitoring locations. Okay, looks like we've got a little bit. We've got a working collections endpoint again. Okay, everything is back to functional. This is great. Okay, so we've got collections, and then within each collection, we've got you can get information on the collections and then the items, and also within this space, you can try it out. So, for example, let's do a similar situation. Search for Wisconsin. And here's one example where we are using codes right now. We've considered putting in state names. County names are harder because county names turns out that there's multiple county names across the country. So using unambiguous identifiers are powerful. Stream. Looking for active stream locations. So we don't make the browser unhappy. We're just going to limit to 100. And then these are easily paged. And we're going to look for across all monitoring locations. And there we are, and there's our response. Let's take a look at this in a slightly larger space. So we've got the familiar GeoJSON structure, including properties, that gives us back all this information that we're interested in. We can also, within here, are links that show us what other networks is this part of. So this location is part of both the overall NWS monitoring locations collection that has all 1 million plus USGS monitoring locations, but it's also part of the real-time service water network. So we can take a look at that. And this just gives a little bit of additional information about the real-time surface water network. Sometimes some of these networks have additional information in here as well about more details, cooperators, contact information, other things like that. And so that is just the big things that I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to note again that here within the blog, we actually have that same example that I shared just a moment ago with that live call. This map here is making a live call to OGC API features. And there's just that really simple HTML that you could grab and hack on however you wished. as you move forward. And with that, we're going to move on to questions.
Thanks for giving us that demo, Jim. That was really fun. So we've had a few questions come in already, and I will start with the first question that I see came in towards the beginning of the call. Can you clarify OGC API versus Water Data API?
Sure. So OGC API is a collection of standards for Water Data API. Sorry, it's a collection of standards managed by the Open Geospatial Consortium, of which the USGS is a member. And we implement a number of those standards. Though there's other standards that either are applicable to water mission area, they're not water-specific standards, or Open Geospatial Consortium has all sorts of things, from urban data and all these pieces. So there's pieces of the Open Geospatial OGC API initiative that are most relevant to us in water, and those are the pieces that we're implementing. There's also other parts of the water data, of other APIs that are focused on water data that may not fit exactly within OGC API. And so there's more space in there than we necessarily see right away within OGC API. Some of those may become standards as we contribute to them, especially around data download. And how do we most effectively stream JSON time series? Those types of things are things we're figuring out working with the broader community. Some of those, and so that's where there's essentially OGC API is going to be a subset of a broader water data API initiative that we're implementing over the next few years.
Great. Thanks, Jim. The next question is, why would the word county be in the county value pair? This was from earlier in the call, before the demo.
Why would the word county be in the county value pair? I'm unfortunately I'd love to talk with you more about what exactly this means. I'm a little confused. I think I feel I need a little bit more context. So please send us an email and I'll be happy to talk about it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Just send us an email at wdfn@usgs.gov, and Jim would be happy to directly answer your question. I think it might have been during the presentation. But this webinar is being recorded, so if you need to reference the place in the recording or something for additional context, that's fine too. So the next question is, I have never used an API before. How do I use one? Do I need to download a program, go to a specific web page? Is it a URL that I just type into my web browser and it knows how to run the API? This is a really great question.
It's a sort of a foundational question. And the answer is actually all of those things can work. So one of the reasons that we are moving to these OGC API structured things is because you can simply put this information into your web browser and get back human readable information that then you can take action on. It is, though, generally expected that you're going to use some sort, eventually you will build on some sort of tool that pulls the data from the API and processes it. Another option, for example, you can also put this information into a GIS tool like QGIS. So here's an example here where I put in a vector layer, which is essentially just this call to the OGC API features, and it appears here as dots in my GIS application. And so that's another example where I'm putting this information into this secondary application that then I can add additional value to.
Okay, thanks for answering that.
Another great place to dig into exactly what we mean by APIs and how some of our structures is that OGC API website that we linked earlier in the talk. It has some really great sort of intro to what we're trying to do in this space as we move forward.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, next question. What is the difference between sensor things and the OGC API? I love this question.
So it's a great question. I think we got a similar question during the Sensor Things seminar. And essentially, one of the things is Sensor Things really predates the OGC API data structure and is another way of solving a similar set of problems. It's JSON first. It's resource centric. But it's also a little, not quite aligned with the structures of OGC API. And so that's one of the things that as they're working toward, as the Sensor Things working group within Open Geospatial Consortium is working toward the next version of Sensor Things, we're working toward harmonizing what's happened in Sensor Things with the OGC API data structures around, for example, collections and items and all these pieces, which aren't really what you see in Sensor Things right now. And so there's some tension there right now in this standards community that we're working to address. The good news is everyone is actually talking with each other, and we're working to figure that out.
Great. Okay, the next question is, are OGC API URLs registered as digital object identifiers to avoid broken links?
Ooh, that's a fun question. No. Right now, these APIs for USGS are on a labs URL, and they could break. They don't have the level of uptime expectations that we have for our core APIs, the work on water services, our legacy systems. And so we are working to fix that and deploy these out to even more of a production level of service. However, these are web services and not really digital objects. And so they probably aren't going to get a specific digital object for, say, an API endpoint. That being said, there's a lot of discussion around how can we most effectively make the data that's available through these APIs amenable to open science and open science workflows, which could lead to minting a digital object identifier for some specific query or other pieces. And so if you've got use cases around that, happy to talk. It's an area where we're still absolutely trying to figure it out. And actually the broader community is as well. How to most effectively cite a data set it's continuously changing is a thorny problem.
Okay, thanks, Jim. The next question is, can you share the link for the API, and also can you clarify if OGC API is different than Water Data API? We sort of answered that question in the beginning, but Jim, if you want to give like a brief summary again, you're welcome to, and we can share the link in the chat.
Yep. Again, essentially, the Water Data API has a little broader than OGC API, especially right now, as we are figuring out different pieces of the puzzle to make our data available. There's parts that fit within the OGC API standards, and there's going to be parts that don't quite fit yet, or may never fit, depending on our use cases. And so that's the piece, is that Water Data API is a broader initiative of which OGC API is a part.
Okay, great. And it looks like that link is in the chat from a few minutes ago. So thanks to Matt for adding that. Okay, next question is there a value pair definition webpage available for all properties?
It's a great question. And it's actually a piece that so yes, there is most of these are based on USGS reference lists. And so those are available on help.waterdata.usgs.gov. However, just noting that this is an area where we know we can do better. And we are working on more effectively making these reference lists available in an automated way. To make it easier to make them easier to use. And this is part of a broader initiative across water mission area to better manage and more effectively manage our reference lists. And we are working on making the data access part of that greatly improved in the coming months and years. There will be probably another seminar specifically on that coming soon.
Yeah, we're gonna keep continuing these webinars, this series. Okay. Next question. Are the APIs being showcased ready for use in production apps? Jim?
So we're using them in production right now for our systems. They don't have, one thing to note is that if you're looking for something that has higher levels of support, right now, no one's being, at this time, these endpoints that are on labs, no one's being woken up in the middle of the night if something goes wrong. And so that's certainly something, if you're thinking about it in that space, then you should stick with those endpoints that are on waterservices.usgs.gov. However, right now, on our pages, on our own pages, we're hitting OGC API features and sensor things for various pieces of information. So certainly a thing to balance, but we are considering, though they're on labs, they are getting toward being, they are considered production services. And also just noting, this is an area where we're working on better communication around things like, what are our expectations for uptime? What can you expect out of a given API? That's another piece of, as we're maturing and modernizing our systems, that's a piece that we're going to be working toward making more visible.
Great, thanks, Jim. Okay, the next question is the Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Science a member of OGC?
I can't answer that with certainty right now. You can look up on the Open Geospatial Consortium website, you can look up membership. And I know that they certainly are involved ancillarily, but I'm not sure if the organization right now is involved, is an actual member.
That is a very reasonable response. Okay. What language or stack are the water data REST services implemented in?
Good question. Most of these are Java based, so Java Spring Boot application. That's what OGC API featured with a Postgres backing store. That's same with sensor things, and so the code. So we are working towards, some of this code has ended up back in an inner source repository, and we're working on getting those back out to open source. Moving forward, other APIs may be using stacks that are more cloud native, where we write, say, a Python script and put it behind something like API, like the AWS API gateway. So those are things we're exploring as we move forward.
Great, thanks, Jim. Okay, we have a few more questions. Have you tested the API and Esri products? Do they seem to play well with ArcGIS desktop and online/portal?
It's a great question. Not as well as one would like, essentially because there are, Esri has made choices around their support of OGC, geospatial data sources, or GeoJSON-based data sources. So for example, you can't just point ArcGIS Online toward a GeoJSON endpoint. However, the Esri open source team has been working toward building adapters for these standard endpoints like OGC API features, because Esri is a member of OGC. And so there are connectors that are being built for a number of these things moving forward. Especially for desktop, it's a little harder for ArcGIS Online. However, noting again, this is an area where we know we need to. We have lots of users that are using ArcGIS Online, and we know that that's another area where we need to be figuring out better ways of supporting those users as well. And that we have users internal and external to USGS that heavily depend on ArcGIS Online. So that's certainly a user group we're aware of.
Great. Okay. This is a pretty specific question, and it's a two-part question. In an earlier slide, there was mention of obtaining metadata. Where can I find more information about that API? Is the metadata in ISO 19115 format? Sorry if I read that wrong. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so sorry. And by the way, I'm looking over here at another thing that has our questions so I can process them. So that's another great question. So metadata, we can put a link to help.waterdata.usgs.gov to get some of that metadata into the chat. And we'll add links to some of these links as well on output or on the blog post after this seminar. The metadata is it in ISO 19115? No. That's a great question though, and putting out standards compliant metadata around more of our data is certainly a area where we're working toward how to most effectively put that information out. And ISO 19115 is really focused on data sets, and that's again one of those challenges that we've got with this type of a situation, which is continuously changing. But it's certainly an area where we want to be able to do more. And the other great thing is those ISO standards and the OGC standards are really starting to come together as well, which really helps us moving forward.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim. This question is on a different topic, and we would definitely like to talk more with you about this. So, Jim, I'm going to read the question and then also encourage the person who asked this question to reach out to us at wdfn@usgs.gov. The question is, what is your group or another one in Water Mission Area doing to replace some of the legacy tools, such as WaterWatch?
Great. Perfect segue to the next 2 months of my and several other of my colleagues' life. So we are kicking off a project today on water alert replacement and figuring out WaterWatch. Different piece of my brain talking about water alert. That's coming soon. WaterWatch and the other watches, Water Quality Watch, Groundwater Watch, and also in interactions with the National Water Dashboard. So you should stay tuned and also reach out to us. We can give you more information, and we want to talk to you if you want to talk about the watches and how you use the watches as we move forward, because that's exactly what we're doing, is what's called a path analysis, where we are digging into all the ways that people are using these systems so we can understand how to most effectively meet our user needs moving forward in new systems.
Right on. Okay, great. Okay, so we have a few more questions that we've already logged, and we're going to ask the remainder of those questions. Any questions that we receive past this point, we will ask for that person to email us at wdfn@usgs.gov. The majority of our questions come in anonymously, so we are not able to reach back out to the majority of the people who ask questions. So for the last few minutes, let's continue with our questions. Can APIs be configured or used to create mass data retrievals for multiple stations like a tabular retrieval? Jim?
That is another great question. Yes. So the way that this is structured is that you can easily page. Trying to get. Oh, I know what's right. Going wrong. Essentially, you can easily page your through data on the. Okay, well, I've lost track of my Firefox. So, but yes, essentially the water quality, each response, if you say you need to get more than 10,000 stations at a time, you can share. There's a link that says next, so you can page through as many pages as it takes to get all the data you need. And so that's a key piece of the OGC API, is allowing for paging without necessarily having to say, oh, okay, here's a list of states. I'm going to chug through 50 states at a time. It's just next. So it's really easy to build a web client that can work through that really easily.
Great. Okay. This question says, I'm interested if does this work with real-time water quality data super gauges? How would a water science center adopt some of this work on a water science center level? We can reach out to this person after the fact. We do, it looks like, have their contact information.
Yes.
But Jim, I encourage you to answer this live if you're able.
So the water data API, the OGC API features right now doesn't have information about what's being collected at that location. So you'd have to dig into, for example, sensor things. But sensor things could be a great way to showcase a super gauge, because you can easily see exactly what's there. And you can also get, for example, more fidelity. If you're actually collecting data at a higher rate than 1 minute, we can handle that in sensor things, which we can't handle in our legacy systems. So yeah, love to talk to you about that. It'd be great to try these things out as we move forward.
Okay, great. And I did capture that person's information, Jim, so we can reply to them in more detail after the fact if we want. Or Jeff, we encourage you to reach out to us via email. Our second to last question, if no more come in, are there any plans for writing R and/or Python packages that act as a wrapper for the OGC API?
Yes. So we are planning on putting these into data retrieval. And in addition to working with the community maintainers of the different water data Python packages that exist. The other really powerful thing is, because these are developer-friendly endpoints, there are tools that have already been built for a number of different approaches for getting this data in. So it shouldn't be too much of a lift to bring it in anyways, because there are already these projects that exist. And we can put a link to a number of different implementations that are out there for clients for OGC API features in the blog.
In the blog post that you're talking about, Jim, that's the one that
for this seminar. We will add a set of links for some of these pieces.
Great. Yeah.
Try to watch me Google for the next in 5 minutes, but I can't. But I know exactly the link I want to share.
Yeah, so to everyone listening, check back on the WDFN blog for the specific post for this webinar. We will update it with those links that Jim's talking about. Okay. All right, it looks like our last question for the day is going to be, My question relates to a monthly retrieval of approved groundwater level data from a large network of sites that we transmit to a cooperator for them to input into their database. Ooh, I love the mention of cooperators. Please, go ahead, Jim.
Okay, so this is probably not tied with OGC API features, but this is a piece of information or a use case I would love to talk to you more about because these types of supporting our cooperators is really, really important as we move forward with our system. So I would love to talk to you and also to talk to that cooperator to understand how they're using our data and how we can build APIs to better support both you and them moving forward.
Great. Okay. So if there are no more questions, and right now there aren't any more questions, then we can go ahead and end the event. We don't have the ability to just like let our audience members speak with this particular platform. So thank you so much to everyone for joining our webinar today, and be sure to check the Water Data for the Nation blog, the general links for which we've posted in the chat a few different times. We will be posting within the next couple of months about future API related webinars. We do have the next API webinar on April 28th. It's also a Monday and it's at the same time, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. The topic of that particular API webinar is changing a little bit from the currently advertised what's next topic to something more specific about another OGC API, like Jim alluded to earlier in his presentation. So definitely check back for that and stay tuned to the blog for other related webinars. Thank you everyone for joining today. Have a wonderful day.